Hi, everybody. My name is Denise Harlow. I'm CEO of the National Community Action Partnership, and thank you for being part of today's conversation. And I say conversation because we are here on Zoom, but we're in meeting mode. Even though it looks like a webinar, you will have the capacity to unmute yourself and ask questions as we go through today's conversation. I will say if we hear any background noise, we also have the power to mute you, so we'll do that as well. So please keep yourself on mute until you are intending to speak. We'll also be keeping an eye on the chat window, so please, comments, questions, concerns, thoughts, or hey, slow down, or can you expound on this? We encourage you to engage in today's session. Really excited to have this conversation today. In community action, we understand that our communities need us to be resilient organizations, right? Community Services Block Grant is entitlement money, in part because every community deserves to have an infrastructure organization there to fight poverty in the community. We don't keep bidding volunteer fire department money, right? Or schools, right? Same thing with poverty money. We have CSBG, it's infrastructure across this nation. We have an obligation then to ensure that our organizations are responsive in all times. And we've seen agencies in COVID responding immediately to this global disaster. We've seen agencies when there's been tornadoes. They may have even lost part of their admin buildings, but they are still open and finding ways to help families in their community. We've seen agencies dramatically impacted by earthquakes. We've seen agencies impacted by fires and certainly hurricanes. Various parts of our country have seen a number of CAP agencies over the years impacted by hurricanes. And we know with the shifting impacts of climate change that our communities are going to be struggling to maintain an energy grid that can tolerate increasing temperatures, that we may be seeing additional natural disasters and finding opportunity or needs windows where we're going to have to stay open. We're going to have to be even more resilient as organizations than we have in the past. So today's conversation is about opportunity now in this moment, given a variety of resources that we're going to be talking about, to leverage to help increase your local agency's resilience. Now, when we think solar, right, for a number of parts of our country, it might mean saving on energy costs, which means you can put more money to mission, which is fantastic. If that's your state, if that's your community and solar installation helps you save money, that's a win for you, right? That's an easy win. But if you're in a community where our community, for instance, you have cheap energy. Sometimes we trade cheap energy for environmental challenges in some parts of our country. If energy is cheap, you might really fit into the equation that we're going to build a more resilient organization and be able to keep our doors open, to keep our food banks temperature controlled so our food doesn't spoil in an energy outage, that we're able to keep our medicines cool if we're running a health clinic and the power goes out. They're able to keep things running and help the community be a drop-in center or a cooling center or a heating center in case of power outages. So I'm really excited to bring eCAP, as we're calling it, electric cap, to this conversation today. eCAP is a partnership across the National Community Action Partnership, Community Action Partnership of Greater Bergen, and we're partnering with the Kresge Foundation as we try to lift this up in a way to help community action agencies around the country leverage today's opportunities. Things shift all the time, right, everybody? It's tough to keep up. And having our panelists here today, you're going to hear they're on the cusp of it. They know what's coming on. They know what resources are available for you to access. There is a time window, though, right? And so we want to find a way to leverage this power of 1,000 local agencies across America. We talk about that all the time in community action. Now is a real moment in time to put truth to that, to put action behind leverage. But we need agencies to lean into this moment. It might feel a little awkward. You're not really sure where all this is headed. I'm glad you're here for the conversation. We are recording this, so you'll be able to listen to it after the fact. We'll make sure everyone gets the slide deck. And Stephen Leitner is here from Cap Solar and eCAP, and he will also be a resource. We'll talk to him a little bit later in today's conversation. So again, we're recording. We're in meeting mode, so you'll have the opportunity later to unmute yourself. Please use the chat window. And we're joined today by Lynne Algrant, who is on the Partnerships Board of Directors. She is from Region 2, from Greater Bergen Community Action. We have Joe Evans from the Kresge Foundation, and then we have Steve Leitner from CAP Solar, all of which we're all working together to create this eCAP project that we hope will benefit the network, benefit the families we serve, reduce energy burden on local agencies, and just help us all be more resilient. So Lynne, thank you so much for your leadership on the board. Thank you for everything you're doing at CAP Bergen. And I'm going to turn the ball over to you.
Great. Thanks, Denise, for that great introduction. And thank you everyone for being here. Denise W., if you can advance the next slide. I'm really here as a board member and as the Chief Resource and Development Officer at Greater Bergen. Part of my role is that community needs assessment. What's coming down the pike? What should we be anticipating? And I really want to talk to you about the fierce urgency of now. I think it's important for all of us to be aware that in the Inflation Reduction Act, it really is going to jumpstart the clean and green energy revolution across America. And as many of you know, California is leading the way, and with 40 million people, so goes California, often so goes the nation. And so we have to really begin thinking about what this means for our organizations and for our communities, because it's coming and we want to be ahead of the curve instead of playing catch up. Next slide, please, Denise. Thanks. And so what does the green future hold for community action agencies? I think as we're going to begin to see coming out of the Department of Energy and the weatherization program, there's going to be a lot more encouragement of us to put heat pumps or solar panels or other kinds of things as a part of the weatherization movement. How can we help homes be more resilient? I think we're going to be looking at a great deal of jobs, and those are going to span the gap from low tech to high tech. But we want to be having our people thinking about how they might benefit in terms of their employment through this green revolution. There are going to be huge changes in transportation, whether it's electric bikes, electric cars, and that means electric charging stations, right? And a lot of our communities, the homes that our folks live in, aren't going to be able to be upgraded to be able to put an electric charging thing on their home. So that we may need electric charging stations in our parking lots, in church parking lots that people have a subscription to and can charge up their cars. And so there's a potential for revenue for our organizations as well. Next slide. And then as Denise talked about, right, what is our role in community resilience? And so this idea of solar and storage at our centers, which we know are accessible to our people, we can become the source of good, clean energy in times of disaster or when the grid breaks down. And so how does that make us even more of an essential community partner to our neighbors and friends if we can keep the lights on, even if they can't have the lights on at home? Next slide, please. And for me, one of the biggest things that I think about a lot is I want to make sure that our clients and our communities are not left out. Too often when new economies, new industries come down the pike, they land in the wealthiest, readiest areas, and they leave us behind. And we're playing catch up. And I think that in this particular revolution, catch up is not a place where we can be. We could find ourselves in 5 or 7 years that all of the well-to-do and middle-class communities have gone electric, and only in poor communities are people still operating with fossil fuels, and our communities will be burdened with trying to maintain gas stations because we're the only ones left driving gas-powered cars. And so when I talk about the fierce urgency of now, I'm really talking about it in terms of we need to ensure that our organizations and our neighborhoods and the clients that we serve are not left behind. And so that means we really have to get ahead of the curve. And we may already be paying catch up, right? Because our buildings are probably not in as good a shape as a community center is in a wealthy community. And so I want to make sure that the green revolution actually lands in the neighborhoods that we care about most, because it will reduce pollution, which we know affects our communities most, because we know it will create resilience, and we know our communities are going to be hardest hit by climate change factors. And it's an opportunity for our folks to get into this economy as it's happening, as opposed to trying to play catch up. And so again, I'm really glad that you're here. I hope that you can hear the excitement that I have. I learn a lot from my colleagues, and this is a fun adventure. So welcome. I hope you enjoy the ride, and now I'll turn it over to Joe. I think I'm right. Is there one more slide? I think I'm done.
Well, the next slide.
Oh, yes. Sorry. Educate ourselves and our neighbors, prepare our leadership and our boards for decision-making, prepare our organizations for new technologies, and to really embrace the innovation. I think if we lead in this way, we will find that the people we serve will feel more comfortable about jumping on this bandwagon. Next slide.
And actually, maybe just stay here for a second.
Sure.
Joe Evans, I'll introduce myself in a second, but I love this slide in part because this is the challenge that I think, you know, the work that I'm doing and Kresge supporting is trying to, how do we, you know, there's this, many of you I'm sure have heard of the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund or the Inflation Reduction Act or changes to the tax credits. And how do we help ensure that although the administration has said its goal is to land the majority of these resources in just as 40 communities, without like getting these things in the bullet list here done, it's not going to happen. And so I think this is a great sort of short list of the challenges that do lie ahead, and you know, assessing your buildings, socializing with your board, identifying a champion within your organization who can carry this forward, are all key to helping these federal resources land in the communities we care about. So the next slide. So I'm Joe Evans. I work for the Kresge Foundation. I think you probably go to the next slide too. Kresge is it's a large, it's a top 20 national foundation, about $4 billion in assets. It makes us kind of a smaller, large foundation. As many of you probably know, foundations typically give away about 5% of their total assets a year. So for us, that translates to a couple $100 million a year, which sounds like a lot of money by itself, but you know, when we're trying to affect systems in which large banks operate and you know they make billions of dollars of profit every single quarter, it's really a drop in the bucket. But thankful to be working with you all. Kresge's 100 years old this year. It was started by this gentleman, Sebastian Kresge, Kresge 5 and Dimes, or maybe a couple people on the phone who have been to a Kresge in their lifetime. I think most of them closed in the 70s. Although it transitioned to the Kmart Corporation. So the K in Kmart stands for Kresge. I work on a social investing team. And I mean, sorry, looking at the slides, the next slide myself. Sure, you could advance to the next slide. So I work on a team we call the social investment practice. Kresge has 7 different grant-making teams focused on different issue areas. One of them is environment. The team that I'm on, we use loans, equity investments, and guarantees to help our grant makers advance their programmatic strategies. And I've been paired with the environment team now for 4 or 5 years. Next slide. So as you know, I think Lynne did a great job. I'm going to cover a little bit of the similar ground, but you know, climate change impacts all of us, and nowhere more than the communities that you serve and where you tend to be located in. The infrastructure tends to be the worst. The flooding is worse. The stability of the grid is less. The power generation's located there. All the good things are, you know, and so as Lynne was saying, as you know, this transition to greater electrification is underway and has been underway. And the projects and the communities that we seek to serve are smaller. The buildings are in less good shape. The building owners are less aware or familiar with the technology, and less well connected to pathways to making that happen. And it's an imperative, I think, on all of us to do something to take advantage of that. And it's true, it's something we say all the time, that as more and more of affluent America moves toward greater electrification, renewable energy generation, electrified HVAC systems and transportation, then the infrastructure, the gas stations, the power lines, the some amount of plants, all that infrastructure, the cost is going to be the same to maintain and is going to stay there, but fewer and fewer people will be left shouldering the majority of the cost of that, and that will fall disproportionately on communities of color and communities with low income. The next slide. I did, I mentioned these and when I first started speaking, but in the Inflation Reduction Act, there's lots of great stuff in there. And Stephen, the president of CAP Solar, will help you understand more of it. And there's other resources to become familiar. There's rebates, there's some grant programs, there's some weatherization money. The two biggest things, however, are what I have here: the extension of the solar investment tax credit and new ways to monetize it. Prior to the Inflation Reduction Act, the investment tax credit is 30%, in some cases more, of the total project cost for your renewable energy project, a battery project, and certain other building decarbonization projects. 30% of the total cost can be paid for through a federal tax credit. And as nonprofit organizations, you don't have a tax liability. So before the Inflation Reduction Act, at least not an income tax liability, before the Inflation Reduction Act, the only way to monetize the credit was a taxpayer had to use it to reduce their income taxes. And so there were complicated tax equity partnerships that were established to bring in investors who had to own the system. And they've made two changes to the tax credit. One that allows the sale of the tax credit, like some of you may be familiar with the low-income housing tax credits or new markets or historics, those where you can sell those credits. And there's well-developed markets for that. On the solar side, the ability to transfer or sell the credits is new. Then there's a second way to monetize them, which is called direct pay. And it's through a 501c3 filing a 990 can apply for the 30% credit as a refund on their taxes, even when there isn't a tax liability. Generally, I wouldn't recommend that individual nonprofits own the system themselves and get the direct pay themselves. That is a pathway that is open, but I think for most groups, you'll be better served by partnering with a group like CAP Solar, where CAP Solar will help you assess the building, plan a project, construct it, and then they are technically the owner of it. You enter a long-term contract to purchase the power from it. But the beauty of the direct pay, and what I'm so thankful for in the Inflation Reduction Act, is now a nonprofit solar developer who shares your mission and your focus on communities with low wealth can monetize a tax credit through the direct pay option. The other huge thing in the Inflation Reduction Act is the $27 billion Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. This is mostly going to come out in the form of lower cost lending dollars through the existing community development finance system. So I'm sure many of you are familiar with community development finance institutions or green banks, community banks, credit unions. And there are a number of different partnerships that are expected to get a share of this fund. But when they're going to be under some amount of pressure to invest that money, and without getting projects ready, building demand, assessing buildings, having financeable projects ready through organizations like CAP Solar, that money's just going to go on to a different, even though the administration has this Justice 40 goal, if the projects aren't ready in the communities we care about, then they're going to go to the community where projects are ready. And they'll talk about how the benefit for Justice 40 community was like, well, we hired workers from the low income community to come, do the work here. And so again, just to underscore the imperative of getting projects ready in the communities we're targeting. Next slide. And so I said this, I probably already beat this drum a few times, but this is a clip from a piece I had in the Hill last year where I think there really has been an outsized amount of attention on the financing, the tax credits, how those mechanisms will work, how the lenders are going to share and split the capital, and comparatively much less focus on getting buildings ready. Assessing projects, working with building owners to understand, the status of their roof and the ability and what solar can do for them, how it impacts their bills, the possibility of becoming a resiliency center, getting EV charging stations ready and charging deserts, all the things that we're talking about today. Next slide. And then Lynn, Kresge was instrumental in starting this partnership. There's a few websites we'll point you to. One is capsolar.org. Another one is this group, chargepartnership.org. eCAP, electric cap, is replicating this partnership. This is a partnership focused on community health centers, primarily federally qualified community health centers. And so there is Collective Energy as a solar developer like Cap Solar, but they're focused on the health centers. The NCAP's equivalent is the National Association of Community Health Centers. Capital Link is a financing and support organization also focused on health centers. And so this is sort of the model that we're following with trying to stand up a similar effort for community action agencies. I think I probably hit most of it. The motivation for community health centers can be a little different. For example, they lose a lot of revenue if power's out. So in addition to wanting to serve as a resiliency center, their programs come to a standstill. I think there are some similarities for community action agencies. No power, you can't serve your clients, or you can offer very little. And the ability to remain open in parts of the country where energy can be unstable or storms are significant is part of the resiliency factor that this can bring. Next slide. So one of the things that I love about this strategy we've been pursuing, so working with community health centers, working with community action agencies, we're talking to YWCAs, food banks, Black churches, some other denominations, community serving organizations that own their buildings and are located in the communities we're trying to serve. And if we think about how far behind communities with low wealth and communities of color are compared to more affluent America, the entry point that we're trying to develop is through organizations like yourselves. So if, for example, your Head Start building or your community action agency went solar, added a battery, had an EV charging station, or just the solar, and then you want to tell your clients about it, and then there is, in the communities that you serve, there's comparatively much less of this technology in place. So if trusted organizations serving communities with low wealth start to address their buildings and see federal dollars land in place, then then you can start to refer your clients to consumer-focused, like-minded providers around solar, ground source heat pumps, induction stoves, EV vehicles. And so and the next slide, please. And we've been thinking about this as like the strategy for some time around, if you can get the community serving building to decarbonize its building, that'll be a great way to get to the clients and the people who live in those communities. And then, in fact, Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory was studying the same issue and came out with a report late last year that sort of validated that approach, that says, that if they did some measurements in a bunch of communities about when a community serving commercial building in a low-income community goes solar, what's the impact on residential solar adoption? And it was a very significant difference in, speeding up that process. So I think at the heart of it, how do we get, Justice 40 communities ready for these dollars that are coming and these tax credits? And it's really by, engaging with business owners and organizations like Cap Solar and NCAP to reach their members to address their buildings. Next slide. And then, so this is, as Lynn, and I think maybe both Denise and Lynn alluded to, there's a lot of regional variation on the cost benefit analysis. I think for largely the green states, not completely, but largely in the green states, you can put the states colored green here. You can put up solar and reduce your utility bills. That doesn't say anything about the expected cost of electricity down the line, which everything that I see, it predicts an unstable increasing cost of electricity. But so if your organization is in any of these green states, you absolutely should be like signing up, assessing your buildings. And you don't have to sign up with Cap Solar. I mean, we just encourage you to, work on this issue for your own organization. But Cap Solar has a pathway and is mission aligned. If you live in any of the other states, I'm definitely not saying don't, put it off. I think you certainly should be looking at this. But for instance, if you're in the Gulf South, that resiliency factor is probably as or more important than what a nominal difference on your electric bill might be. And the need for resiliency centers and funding for resiliency centers from various state, federal, and regional sources is greater in certain parts of the country than in others. So I just wanted to put this up to give, that it is the cost of electricity is differs regionally, and the places that are colored green, I think, will have an easier time of getting to a project that immediately starts to save money. In other places, there needs to be, sometimes other rationales for pursuing the work. But again, you should, wherever you are, I'd recommend signing up for an assessment and starting the conversation about how to move forward. And with that, I'll pass it over to Stephen.
Hello. You're going to have to advance a slide or two, please. One more. Awesome. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. My name is Stephen Leitner. I'm the president of Cap Solar. Thank you for being here. Can you advance the slide, please? So Cap Solar is a member of the Community Action Network. We've been working in New Jersey for the last 10 years, and we have had various programs that we have spread around the country to announce, but this one is by far the most exciting. And the thing about Cap Solar is that since we're part of the network and we work with the network, we really understand your needs and your programs. Next slide, please. So I always say this is one of the biggest slides in the presentation. There are 2 or 3. But this is our goal, is our mission statement. So the 3 partners have come together, NCAP, Kresge, and Cap Solar have come together to create, as Joe said, a very large pipeline of projects inside the National Community Action Network. That means your buildings of your partners, etc. Now, why is the pipeline important? It's important because to go to the $27 billion greenhouse gas reduction fund and any other financial or foundation, you will need scale. And we have that scale. As a matter of fact, we have so much scale that I believe once this pipeline is maximized, that we as Community Action will actually have the voice of low-income solar to change the narrative everywhere in the country. We will become the most experienced renewable energy for low-income persons and organizations that there is. Can you please advance the next slide? So these are some of the outcomes that we expect for your caps. I'm going to go through these. We'll go through these very briefly. We don't have a lot of time, and I want to make sure that people unmute anytime you want or chat. Do a chat in the ask a question in the chat, whatever you like. Next slide, please. So what are we and what are we not? So we're not that guy knocking on your door. I know every single person in this meeting probably has had this person knocking either on their door of their office or knocking on the door of your house. I can tell you that the chief operating officer of Greater Bergen had a long conversation with me about letting one of these guys in their house and him saying that he was going to set up community solar on her roof. That's not possible to do. And I told her that I knew the organization that person comes from, and they literally grab people they will take anybody that comes in, train them for 2 weeks, and then let them out with an iPad and a script. We don't do that. So we're part of the network. We understand your needs. I've said that. Our entire process is completely transparent to you from introduction to funding to construction, everything. And we'll sit with you. We will work with you with your board. We will work with you to manage the process, to engage your community. As a matter of fact, the other services that we provide is that eCAP found a grant in Washington State that the CAPs in Washington State weren't aware of. And this is a $57 million planning and construction grant. And I'm happy to say that on Monday, 17 planning projects and 1 construction project are being submitted to the Commerce Department of Washington State. That is the depth of how far we will go. We will try to find the grants. If you find one, we will help you apply for it. Next slide, please. So a lot has been said about the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, excuse me. Now, the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund is a $27 billion competition, what they called it. And really, to put it simply, it's 3 levels of competition that that makes loan products to pipelines like the one that we're talking about. With the size of a pipeline that we're talking about building with you, we will be able to go to the immediate winners of the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. Unlike a CAP or a business that wants to apply for a project, having to go to a 2nd or 3rd or 4th level grantee of this money. So that is really important. It's important for us to build this pipeline. At scale, we can also approach debt and equity. CAP Solar started with a $10 million loan from Goldman Sachs. No government incentive, no government money, no grants, nothing. It was just started with a $10 million loan from Goldman Sachs. It has been wildly profitable. Goldman Sachs exited the deal after their tax credit expired, and we manage the 2.3 megawatts project with Goldman Sachs as a business called CAP Solar. A large pipeline also allows us to go in its scale to foundations. Unfortunately, Joe doesn't work for the direct granting part of Kresge, which made me sad after I got introduced to him. But the fact is that we can go to foundations who are looking for climate change investments, who are looking to serve low-income populations because of the disproportionate health issues that come from climate change. Whether that be what projects, we'll talk a lot about solar, but those projects can be all of the ones that Lynne discussed and more. Next, please. So this is the other important slide. So this is what you can do. Now, there is no obligation to, when you register your buildings, you'll get an assessment from us. We will look at it. We will look at the local and the state laws and the regulations, etc. But I encourage you to go to that link and to register every building you have, whether it's leased or owned, whether it needs a new roof or not. This is where the pipeline starts. And the biggest thing you need to do is register your buildings. We will take it from there until we need you again. And that's going to be to schedule a site visit, to progress this program. Then you become part of the pipeline, and then we will introduce that to the GGRF winners, the foundations, and the debt and equity players to be funded. What does that mean? That means that if there's a project that doesn't have a good return, can be offset by a project that has a great return. So projects that wouldn't normally be built will be built, and our entire mission is to save you money and increase your resiliency. Next, please. So I'm going to say go to the link and register all your building. But who qualifies for this? Everybody qualifies for this. Every building qualifies for this. Caveat to low-income housing, if they're master metered, that is much easier to do than individual meters, which is too expensive. But any building that you own, any building that you lease, any building that you have a partner that owns it can be part of the pipeline. Remember, the goal here is to register as many buildings as possible and then validate them and then bring them to the market. So there are 3 phases that we're looking at right now, which are on the bottom of the screen. We're looking for some early adopters to prove to the market that this can be done. So early adopters will raise money now, and what we'll do is we'll go into those markets that have good roofs and electrical, the buildings that have them, and we will build those projects now. Later on, when the GGRF monies and the pipeline is built to approach the GGRF monies and other, we'll be able to finance new roofs. So we can come in and build solar and replace your roof in one project. And then the ongoing pipeline is if a building needs pretty much everything, new roof, new electrical, more site surveys, and things like that. But those can get taken care of in the ongoing pipeline projects. Next, please. So how do these things work? Well, the resiliency hub is a very important thing. Both Joe and Denise and Lynne touched on it, but how do they work? Next slide, please. So let's say this is your building and you can click, please. This is an animated thing. So you got your building lights on, and what you're doing is you can just keep clicking. You are just sending money to the grid. So you say, hey, let me get a solar panels. I heard great things about them. Click, please. How do you do a solar panel? How does it actually make electricity? So obviously the sun goes into the panel, and then it has to be converted from DC to AC. Please click. And again. So it converts from DC to AC. We all love that band. And all of a sudden, please, next click, please. All of a sudden, when you make excess energy, it starts coming back to you in form of payments from the utility. This is called net metering. Caveat, net metering is not in every state, and it varies from utility to utility. Sometimes it's full retail, full retail price is New Jersey has that, and then sometimes it's so low that you really do you can't count on it as revenue. It's called avoided cost, usually 2 cents. Next, please. What do you do when it's dark or stormy? Next, please. This is where the resiliency comes in. This is where a battery is sized so that if there are issues, disasters, all the lights go out, or anything else that requires resiliency, a battery backup can provide power to your building when the power is out. Batteries are programmable so that maybe you want to sell your power back to the grid when it's peak demand, or basically you can store all the power for backup. And that's what creates a resiliency hub. So you have a building and you want to make it a hub for people in your community. When the power goes out, they can come to you. They can get they can have air conditioning. They can get a cold meal. They can use a computer. They can charge their phones. Maybe you have some washing machines, things of that nature. A sized battery will provide that for you. Next, please. So there are 2 types of ownerships. Normally in here, Joe discussed where Cap Solar will own it. That's called a power purchase agreement. And then there's also you would own the system. Next, please. So please click. So what happens here is if you have a project in your facility, partner facility, or anything of that nature, we would own it. We would get the funds for it from the GGRF or the other funding opportunities, and install it connected, and we would maintain it for the life of the solar panels. Click, please. You would pay nothing to have it built, and you would just pay an agreed upon power rate, kilowatts per hour, that should be lower than what you pay now. There's no risk. There's a minimal time that you would have to spend. This is the register your building, and we'll do everything. Next, please. And click again, please. So if you want to own it, we can help you provide funding. We will be able, we'll still design and install and operate it, but you're going to have to pay all the other costs. There's maintenance costs, there's insurance costs, there's replacement costs. There are many other costs, but if you want to shoulder that, you will be getting quote free power minus the debt you had to take out in order to install a system. Next, please. So what is the process? So the first thing is go to that link and register your buildings. There's no commitment. All you need to do is register them. We want a large pipeline. Right now, after 2 months, we have about 86 buildings in our pipeline. The pre-pipeline, we would like to have hundreds of buildings ready to go in front of financiers, in front of foundations. We will become a force. So these are all the other things. You really do one, and we do the rest. Everything for this is what we said before. So all of the site surveys, the proposals, everything, we will give those to you. We will walk you through them. We will walk your board through them. We aim to take mostly everything off your plate so that you can go on with your mission without having to dedicate capacity. Next, please. This is what the website looks like. And really simply, the only things you have to put in are these fields. There are other fields on here, but we just need your building address and some information. So I encourage you to be doing it. And I'm guessing there's a lack of questions because everybody is registering their buildings as we speak, every single person. And I thank you for that. Next slide, please. So these are the additional questions that will help us categorize your projects. So if you need a new roof, we're not scared. You shouldn't be either. We are working with a very large vendor, national vendor, who has a roofing program that we are going to tap into. Also, when those things go into the pipeline, we know how much money for the project will cost, so we can get the appropriate money for your project, depending on, if you need a new roof, you need electrical, and things of that nature. That is why we collect this information. And of course, for financial pre-analysis, we would like a month of electric bill from you in order to give you a full report. Next, please. So this is what you'll get back. This is a building in Boston. And this is what you will get back once we get the information that you've provided. We will do a write-up of your building, how much it can hold, and if you've given us how much solar it can have, and if you've given us your utility bill, about how much money you could save. Next, please. And what if you need a new roof? Well, we've touched on that. If you need a new roof, that's fine. We have the partnerships. We have the construction partners. We can do everything. If you need a new roof, that's great. So, what it's going to look like is going to be a solar plus roof payment for you. These are very low interest loans coming from the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. And in some circumstances, if you have grant money and you want to pay down your roof or pay down the cost of power, you can do that. Next, please. So the step after you register your buildings, once they're qualified, is that we will send someone to your premise and to do these inspections. They'll see if there's shade, how good is your roof, and if the electrical is up to snuff. Now we can talk about that, but these come back as certified engineering documents. This is the first step past registration to doing a full analysis of what it's going to cost, how long it will take, etc. This is the first important step after registration. Next, please. So this is your process. So what do you have to do with us? So register your buildings. Now go to that link and register the buildings. I'm serious. Go through there's an application process that we walk you through. We'll validate your building, which is what we just showed before. And we'll even meet with your board. We'll meet with your board. We'll answer your questions. We'll talk to anyone that you would like us to talk to about this. And afterwards, there'll be legal documents that puts your building in the formal pipeline. Those legal documents is I agree to pay this amount of money for this amount of power for coming off the roof or the my surrounding buildings. And the other one is to say you have my permission to install solar on my roof or around my building. That's it. That's absolutely it. Basically, all you have to do is get to this point. Your building and your projects are in the pipeline, and we can approach the financing straight after that. Next, please. Oh, one more, please. Just again, this is the web page that you would register your buildings to. Next, please. And that's it. If you want to talk to me, you want to schedule a meeting with me, rather than register, I encourage you to register, but get in touch with me for anything, any questions, anything. We have spent 2 weeks with our friends in Washington State answering any and every question and helping them write grants. We will do that anywhere in the country for a project that's for financing. Just get in touch with me, and I really appreciate your time, and I would love to take some questions.
Stephen, can I just, there was a question in here from John earlier. Can you just talk about the difference between maybe somebody who was exploring solar a couple years ago, and how the landscape is different now? Just in terms of, there were a lot of upfront costs sometimes when they were talking to folks, then we're going to give you the panels in 20 years for $1, and like, what do you do with them then? Just how are you seeing the landscape being a little bit different now, in terms of what people might have been pitched even 3 years ago, 4 years ago?
So I cannot stop getting social media feeds about people. I look at solar all day. If I have one more recommendation for someone giving me something for free, I'm going to lose my mind. It's not free, no matter who tells you. What it is that, like we were describing in the power purchase agreement, we will buy everything and install it for free, but you do have to pay for it. Now, the difference back then to now is the concept of the power purchase agreement. You spend 11 cents now. We want you to buy power from us for 8 or for 5 or whatever it is. So that's kind of gone out the window, because there are a lot of people that don't pass credit checks, and businesses, and there's not a nonprofits don't pay taxes, don't have normal filing, so a lot of them don't have credit except for against the grants that they make. So what's happened is people have moved away from that, but that certainly is the most affordable way that was able to do the solar at your location. They've gone to a lease option where you have to do, some states, 2 or 3 states, you actually can't do a power purchase agreement. But they've gone to a lease option, which means, hey, you're not paying 5 cents anymore for your power. You're buying the equipment on lease. So if that equipment is $10,000, it's not. If it's $100,000, you're paying a monthly cost to own that at the end of 20 years, which is the useful life of the equipment that's been installed. So you're not really doing anything but buying it, and then that eases the risk for the solar installer, because they'll get guaranteed payments and make profits every month. And then there's the ownership, which has always been there, which is you just buying it outright. But obviously for us, a PPA, a power purchase agreement at a lower cost for power, or increased resiliency to throw the battery in, is much more attractive, because it's not going to cost thousands of dollars a month in a lease. Let's see, what else? Who else? I see a question. I think I saw a question about Head Start buildings. So I have this question from one of my meetings from California. The Greater Bergen Community Action was started, CAP Solar, because they couldn't find anybody to do solar properly. They have many Head Start buildings, and the federal interest in those Head Start buildings, what you should do is you should ask permission to do this sort of thing. But if you can do capital improvement projects, you can do this by not asking. I didn't say this on here. Our CEO, the CEO of Greater Bergen, did ask, and still has not had a reply 9.5 years later. So I don't think the federal government is going to come and inspect your roof, but that's going to be left up to you. But like I said, no response for the last 9 to 10 years. Okay. Lynn, do we have, I can scroll
Stephen,
through.
I'll just add that regional offices vary. So people know their regional office is best. So asking, we would recommend asking. And then if there's no response, there's no response. But yeah, I think you gotta, but I see Clarissa's question. So
there's also a case that if you don't enter a lease and you don't enter a PPA and you do a lease, there are some nuances with that as well. But if you installed on the grounds, you're not putting a subordinate. You're not trying to ask the federal government to be subordinate to someone else who is leasing your roof to install solar. So I can get into that much more. That's more of a CFO conversation.
Yeah, I think it's probably, if you have the very specific example, that's why you're here, right, Stephen, is they can call you afterwards, set up a time, absolutely, and really do a deep dive. So yeah, I think the Head Start interest question is going to be of particular interest to the network for those of you who run Head Start. So please, please, please have an offline with Stephen. I think that would be incredibly helpful because we don't want to discourage either. We think that there's a huge opportunity, and what a win for Head Start if we're able to help put solar panels on those buildings.
And look, a pipeline at the, the need for it at scale changes the entire game. It gives us a way for all of us to go and answer that question. And that's why it's important to start the conversation by registering your buildings.
Steve.
Yes.
This doesn't have to be on a building, does it? Okay.
No.
We get like an acre of grass, we would really love to panel.
Yeah, I mean, really, the parking lot canopies or ground mounted is amazing. It's just something that doesn't necessarily come to mind for us in New Jersey because there's no such thing as land here anymore. And so we have to often remind ourselves that there's space out there for panels, right? That we just can't even imagine.
Of the 718 grants that we just submitted in Washington State, 14 of them have canopy solar in their parking lot. They also don't have space, but ground mount solar is actually easier to do than rooftop solar. Rooftop is being mentioned here because it's the cheapest, but absolutely. And if you own a plot of land that's connected to yours in most states, you can use that as well, even if it has a different address.
Yeah, we're in Vermont. We have lots of land.
I'm going to get off this and start driving.
Stephen, one question. John Fitzmaurice, Community Concepts CAP agency here in Maine. What's the turnaround time from the time that we get signed up for this? I did some work with NCAP. I think I signed my contract 2 years ago and was under the impression it was going to be a year. And then CMP had some issues with upgrading the grids, is what the excuse was. And then secondly, when I finally got the notice that we were getting close to going online, only 2 out of my 12 projects actually went online at once. So although now I'm saving 15% off those 2 larger consumed bills, it's been a long drawn out process. So I'm just curious of what we're looking at for a timeline.
If you ask Joe Evans from Kresge, it'll be done the day after next week. He likes projects done quickly. The reality is that, there's financing dependent, which is why the pipeline is important. That money, I think, is going to be released in November, and then the underwriting, et cetera. So all that same sort of thing. The real limitation, you hit on both of them, are permitting and your utility. Utilities aren't the friendliest when it comes to power being taken out of their grid because they make less money. And normally, if you live in an area that doesn't have a lot of things around it, they're going to claim that the power can't be accommodated on their grid. That takes an interconnection engineer on our side to talk to their interconnection people at the utility. Anecdotally, we had a project we tried to do in Oregon, and they told us it'd be $1 million to update their grid, and our guy got it down to $250,000. But it is the utility and the permitting office that really do delay this. One of the things we have going for us is that we probably know people in City Hall in the permitting office, so it's possible that we can fast forward through that. Depending on the size of your installation, I don't know why the utility would tell you they need to redo the grid because you're using most of the power at your location. So, and those types of consulting things we're here for, even if you're going with somebody, with another person. Remember, we're part of the network. We're going to serve the network. I hope I answered your question. If I didn't, let's get on after. Let's schedule something to talk more.
Hi, this is up in my hand. I'm in West Kentucky, unfortunately not one of the green states that you showed on the map earlier, but I'm really excited by some of the possibilities that I'm hearing here. Actually, what Joe mentioned in his in the chat there is something I'm wondering about too. Is how this can connect with weatherization. We've got a great team of folks here who who are helping people every day. And we've seen almost every other project where the roof, does need to be worked on. And while we're working on the roof, and we do something with solar. So I'd love to hear more about that, either now or later privately. Would be great.
I think a lot of people may have this question. So weatherization on homes, it's if you're replacing a roof, it's mostly a money thing. How much money can you get to weatherize? If you have to replace their roof, you probably spent the money that you could have used solar for, but you can't put solar on because you don't have a roof. These are questions that are being asked a lot, and Joe and I have talked about it quite a bit. And I think that other than what I've just said, I think that's a conversation that I think a lot of people want to have, and I would be happy to engage in it. The common theme here is that I'll be happy to engage in any conversation.
And then just more rural examples, Stephen, if you have them. It's just a question. Do you have rural examples? Are we building a pipeline in rural parts too? What's your vision for rural America?
We would build a pipeline if it was on the moon. This is, this is a scale thing. Rural has an advantage for the USDA grants. They have advantages for different kind of funding. LISC Rural, probably a lot of you have used. There are advantages to doing everything. Like I said, if a project doesn't cost out in Western Kentucky or Eastern Kentucky, but it costs out in California, the savings to the cap in California and the general average that the pipeline funder is going to have, they will include those projects. So yes, everywhere, please.
And that gets to your scale, Stephen, right? So to play with the big guys, ironically, in terms of getting dollars, we need to have scale large enough to play with the big ones, right? And that's where we talk about this network of 1,000 agencies with so many buildings, so many buildings. You talk a little bit more about how that works in terms of getting to big resources needs this pipeline of significant size.
Yes, agreed. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
What happens when I see John Fitzmaurice, sorry, my eyes are just terrible. What happened? You have panels that were done, and at the end of the life, you were stuck with 20 to 25-year-old panels. Most contracts will have a remove my panel clause at the end of it if you're doing a power purchase agreement, but at the end of the lease, you own. They'll flip that to ownership for you, and then they're stuck on your roof. So it depends on what your contract says. At Cap Solar, for the projects in New Jersey, we stopped the project after 15 years and then turn those over to the nonprofits that have those panels so that they can enjoy the rest of the useful life of the panels at no cost.
I would think also there probably would be an option to continue as, Cap Solar as a service provider, because if you wanted to, you take over the panels, now your responsibility for replacing inverters or operation and maintenance of the system. So I think there'll be, I think Cap Solar will have an option if you're in a position where you prefer to own them yourself, and but you would like a like-minded developer to help you through the process. And so I think there's, ideally we'll be able to have a solution for everyone that wants one. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, I agree.
Stephen, there was another question about what about buildings that are in the development pipeline for the local agencies? They're 2 years down the road from occupancy. How do they play in this project that we're talking about?
I don't see how they don't play. If they're a theoretical building, I'm not sure how you finance a theoretical building, but Joe's got some of the best financial minds in the world sitting in his offices to figure these things out. I would say right now, go ahead, put it in. If you have plans for the buildings and whatnot, I can take a look at those and develop solar on top of your plans. And there was a project in Wisconsin a long time ago that I was talking to a CAP director there who's in the same position. I actually had, because it was a small project, I actually had him go to his builder and sell the tax credits to his builder to put solar on top of his roof to own those panels. And it worked out great. He's been interviewed on TV for it.
I see Peter's question. Have you done any retrofits of low-income apartment buildings?
The retrofits as putting panels on the roof for the land next to it?
Peter, if you want to unmute or expand in the chat.
I mean, if that's the question, it's as long as your low-income housing is master metered, it makes it a lot easier, and it can be a large project dependent. I know of there are CAPs that have neighborhoods of low-income housing, and if those are master metered, that is going to be a very attractive project.
Yeah, we're having metering issues here in Wisconsin. They don't want to give any master meters. You want to meter every apartment. We have very restrictive laws here.
Yes.
But, you know, I appreciate your willingness to take a whack at all these things, Steve, as you know, and, you know, we'll take a look at this. But
Peter, I'd do any project with you that you could come up with. You're my hero.
Oh, heck, thanks.
Well, and that's a message. You're willing to kind of tackle any of these challenges at the local agency level.
Absolutely.
And you've worked with a lot of agencies, Stephen, that you've seen a lot of different things and you can figure it out, yet you can speak with the, you know, it's a good translation. It's just, if you have a unique circumstance and you think, boy, it probably doesn't apply to me, but I wonder, set up a call with Stephen because he'll figure out whether it does or not. A question I know we're going to need to wrap up here in a few minutes, but question I had here, I'm sitting in Santa Fe today, was around historical preservation. And you and I chatted a little bit about this before the meeting started today. Talk a little bit about if you have restored a historical building, some of the if there are opportunities there and some of the challenges that you've been able to overcome.
So we had this. I'm only talking about Washington, but we do have like 80-something other buildings. But this is just the most recent one, and it did have a building that was historically preserved. They did not have to worry about the roof because the roof was not historically preserved. But this is going to be a case by case. But I think the Historical Preservation Society probably doesn't, you know, if they're letting you shore up the infrastructure, I'm pretty sure they don't really are bothered by the roof as much as the way everything looks. But that's going to be a case by case basis. But the other thing, you know, attached to that is I've had questions that I've dipped into like Greater Bergen's resources, but I've also dipped into other CAPs that I've been working with who have the same issue, and they have the answer. So the bigger this pipeline gets, the more the conversation happens, we will be able to take resources from all the CAPs to answer questions and hopefully have some sort of central repository as that gets larger.
Great. Well, we are a little past the top of the hour, so I think we're going to go ahead and wrap up. If you're coming to Seattle, folks, we will have a presentation and a session going a bit further into this work. We'll be further along in this development. And if you are coming to the annual convention, we will have an energy track, as well as weatherization, pre-con, and a bunch of stuff around energy-related activities. So if this has gotten your juices flowing, there's more to come. So we'd love to see you in Seattle, and we'd love to have you reach out to Stephen. We want to build the pipeline. We talk about our scale. We've got scale here. We got buildings, but we're going to need agency folks to kind of lean into this moment so we don't let the technology leapfrog ahead of us and we're playing catch up 3 to 5 years from now. Now is the time. So with that, I want to thank Lynne, Stephen, and Joe for your session and your input and your just detailed knowledge about all of this space, and to the CAP agencies who've attended today. So appreciate your interest, and we look forward to hearing more. So with that, we'll wrap up, and hopefully we'll see you in Seattle, if not before. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Denise.